owner of the Instagram account at Decolonizing Therapy. So I just want to thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Khadija. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And could you describe what you do in your own words?
Yes. So I would love for this to be like a really simple answer, but it's not these days.
Yeah.
These days, okay, so I am trained, and I have air quotes here for people that can't see, as a clinical psychologist. So I did my undergrad in Jersey City, New Jersey, at a university I currently work in. And then I did my master's at NYU, and then I left across the country in United States to go to California and went to school at California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. So through all this training and internship, it led to what I do now. So majority of my day is working at the university. I do one-to-one therapy, crisis, couples, group work is really my forte and what I really focus on. But in working and growing up in the inner city in Jersey City, in New Jersey, what I started understanding very quickly is that a lot of the systemic dis-ease and systemic issues, such as, various disabilities people are living with, down to gender identity, sexual orientation, right? Like race, color, all of it, was really not naturally woven into what I learned in school. Maybe I had a multicultural class, maybe a diversity, right? Maybe there was a textbook. I remember Greer wrote, Even the Rat Was White in Research Method. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. So it was interesting. It was there, but it was not at the forefront. But believe it or not, my experiences in school in California really highlighted systemic inequities for me and highlighted how colorism played out. And I was going through a lot of discrimination at my school while I was getting my doctorate in psychology. And so my dissertation was on intergenerational trauma, healing the intergenerational soul wound for inner city Black male youth. And as I started digging into ancestral intergenerational trauma, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. We're not digging into all of this. So, if my family was displaced, or half of my ancestors, right, and they were removed forcibly, or there were no more crops, and the U.S. came and they colonized and they took all of our crops and they crossbred with the women and they, put army bases. So of course people are going to have to migrate. Of course people are not going to be able to stay there.
Yes.
So, right? Like as I started digging further, it was just like, wait, like they're blaming us for like wanting to come to United States or to Canada or any of these places. But the reality is that y'all have already come in and taken all of our fucking, excuse me.
No, you can swear on this podcast.
Okay,
That's okay.
I'm very expressive, if you can't tell. Taken all of our resources. So I do work at the university for the past 10 years, and I work with students that teach me every single day. I am so grateful for them. But it led to me writing a little bit more, which became Decolonizing Therapy.
Yeah.
I was tired of therapy falling in the hands, doing the bidding of the system.
That's a good way to phrase it.
And that's how I feel. I just feel like we don't mean it, because many of us get into this field to do well, to do good, whatever that means, to bring healing to people. And some of us still can do that. But I think that there is a limitation, particularly for people living with a majority of like identities in the margins or oppressed, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. And I think another reason why it's so different in our century is that we've put therapy in the medical model, whereas perhaps in the past it would have been a more shamanic, spiritual model.
Yes.
And so it's very disconnected. For me, I find in a lot of ways.
Yes. Absolutely. And that disconnect, I think, breeds further confusion. Right? So when we feel disconnected, whether it's disconnected from our bodies, disconnected from our people, disconnected from our culture, it immediately leaves this feeling of like, what am I doing? Where am I at? Who are my people? And then it's easier to just like shove other forms of conditioning in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, part of what I do now is I have chosen to take a stand. So it's not that I don't do therapy outside of the university, it's that I'm choosing to not necessarily call it that when I do one-to-one
Okay. Yeah.
groups,
Mm-hmm.
because I do integrate forms of healing that I have had and continue to have years of practice in, relearning the ways of my
Mm-hmm.
ancestors, initiations. I'm currently in a shamanic apprenticeship for the next few years, probably of my life, or until spirit says otherwise. You know, I am constantly remembering things that my mother, grandmother, aunts, tias, people
Mm-hmm.
have said. So I'm taking the time. I realized that therapy wasn't the only healing modality for me. It was also all these other ways of knowing for me, and as I started imparting that more on my students and the people that I serve and work with, the more I realized, like, wait a minute, ancestral wisdom is what anchors us.
Yeah, I love that.
But
I love
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
so that is like a huge, big picture of what you do. Can you describe sort of on a daily basis, day to day, what your tasks are during the day? What do you get up to Monday to Friday?
Oh,
Or
wow, that's a great.
actually, I mean, I guess whatever your schedule is. I know a lot of therapists work Saturdays, Sundays too.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, so to be honest, this is okay. Let me give you a regular day for me. So without giving you all of my personal details, but one of the things that I'm big on is like
Mm-hmm.
ritual. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it brings us back to, like, again, our people's ways.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times our people, no matter where they were in the world, got up and either fed the animals, right? Or they like tilled the field, or they like made cafe or whatever. So I make sure I'm big on my rituals, so I don't check my phone for like the first hour
Mm-hmm.
at all. I try to get in like 10 minutes of some kind of visualization or meditation, and I definitely do like morning questions
Mm-hmm.
that I've been creating and working on, helping me to ground more to like what kind of day my people want me to have,
That's
right? And
awesome.
spirits. Um,
Yes, being guided.
yeah, exactly, right? And because I work in a very capitalistic neoliberal system and I work for a university, I'm not able to just get up right now. Like, I don't have the privilege to say, oh, I'm gonna just take a walk this morning,
Yeah.
Like when I wake up, my days are like boom, 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 really early.
Yes.
So I try to get in some movement if I'm too tired, which has been happening a lot lately, like because of the exhaustion of, capitalism and burnout.
Capitalism fatigue that you talk about.
Right? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's so exhausting. I go to work after I do all my morning rituals
Mm-hmm.
and feed my cat and blah, 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 blah. So I'm there from like 9 a.m. and it depends. Sometimes it's like 4:30. It's what it's supposed to be. But most days it's like 7 or 8. And when I'm there, I'm in meetings. I am meeting one-to-one with my students. We have a wait list of like 50 above. We don't have enough counselors at the
Oh,
university.
wow.
So we're
That
seeing,
is a story I've definitely heard in my own
right?
university.
Right? It's very intense. I'm going to staff meetings. I'm running LGBT support groups some
Mm-hmm.
days. I run a peer education group other days. Sometimes I'm teaching a class. I definitely make sure I get in lunch and walk around. And then
Yeah.
after that, if I haven't like done some kind of movement practice in the morning, then I do it after work. And then I go home and work with my private clients from decolonizing therapy. So then I maybe have 2 to 3 people that I'm serving, and we do ancestral, politicized healing work.
I love
Uh,
that.
yeah, so that's generally, and then I probably watch, after I'm done, eat some food, maybe watch a Netflix show.
Well, you need to decompress and like get some froth after a heavy day. I'm an advocate for Netflix.
Right? What are you watching right now?
Right now, I was actually watching Grace and Frankie, the 6th season. Oh my, I love Grace and Frankie. I
Me
love that
too.
they're showing like an older woman's life,
Yes.
and not a doomsday way.
Yes, yes, and I love that younger generations are really digging that
I
too.
love it.
And if you don't mind me asking a question, if that's
Mhm.
okay with you, I
Yeah,
don't
for
want to go
sure.
off topic, but do you identify more with Grace or with Frankie?
Oh, that's really hard to say because I
Yeah.
definitely have a spiritual side, but like Frankie does. But my Instagram page is also called Brown Girl Biz. So there's definitely the business geek like Grace. So I don't know. I'd like to think I'm their love child,
Yeah.
or I want to be their love child.
I love it. Yeah, I can identify. Honestly, that's how I would answer it too. I have a very spiritual side and very woo. My family would be like, okay, you're Frankie. But I also know, right? Like I'm hella like, I can be rigid.
Yeah. And you work hard.
Yeah.
So that's very Grace. So
Very, right?
I love that show.
Yeah, me too.
So getting into the psychology field, what would you say a misconception is that most people have about your field?
That we make people feel better.
Mm.
I think that's a massive misconception. I think it's a nice goal. I think that I always tell the people I work with, particularly in the university, because it's usually their first time. Most of them are either some, Black identified, Latinx, Filipino, Arab. Like I live in a very, very, very diverse area. Not equitable, just diverse, right?
And there's a difference for the listeners.
Very big difference. But the students, it's usually like their first time in counseling. So I have to let them know, like they can, oh my gosh, after meeting with you, Dr. Mullan, I feel so much better. And I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to embark on this work a bit, I need you to know that it might get a lot heavier and more painful before it gets lighter, and therapy isn't just like, I'm feeling better, feeling better, like going up. Rather, it's like relief. And then I had to dig in the trenches a little bit and get some stuff and unearth it. And a little bit of relief, and then sometimes it's just relief, and sometimes it's trenches. And I think that that's where traditional therapy can be super hella helpful, because it helps people deal with some basic coping mechanisms and skills.
Yes.
Right, and I'm there to be empathic. I'm giving them a therapeutic, healthy connection. I'm seeing them, hopefully, therapist, right? We're seeing somebody fully for who they are. We're connecting with them on another level, and it probably is a little bit refreshing.
And I'm guessing it depends on where the client's at. Sometimes they may need more day-to-day, just how do you get through the day, survival techniques, and then they may need to go through the digging through
Absolutely.
the ancestral trauma, generational trauma, and that healing that can only happen if you know what you're healing.
Exactly. And you have a foundation.
Yes. Right? And you have support, and you're not just doing it on your own, which can be leading you to a deep, dark place. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that that's a little bit of what happened to me in the beginning of my journey, is not knowing what I was doing, and not on purpose, but I didn't have a guide, and one of my favorite therapists in California was not a therapist. I just call her therapist because, but I knew she wasn't. She
providing
was
healing?
Yes. But she was just an amazing, she was like my spiritual mama, and she still is in so many ways. And she was the one that would look at me and like sit back and rock back and forth and be like, Jen, that's your internalized anti-Blackness coming up. And I'd be like, like that pain. Like, no, what? What do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. Why would it be? You have to just sit with it and see what your body says. And to me, that was so different. I didn't learn that in school, but I was able to learn that from people that I was working with. So I think that's a misconception that you're just going to feel better. It will ultimately benefit you tenfold, therapy, but I think it's a misconception that we're just going to feel better. I think that it is, the work can be beautiful, and it can also be treacherous, and you need a really strong, grounded guide.
Yes. Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
Oh, it totally did. And I mean, just for me, at least, I know there are a lot of messages we receive that make us think we have to go through things alone. We have to be independent. We can't ask for help. So thank you for mentioning that.
Sure. Yeah.
What is a misconception you had before you entered your field?
So many. Let me minimize this for you. I think one of the misconceptions I had, is that I would suddenly be seen as a full human, and with the respect that whatever I thought in my mind a doctor gets treated like, little young me thought that I would suddenly like myself more, that people would respect me more, that my word would not be questioned as extensively and consistently. I was under the belief that suddenly having doctor there would kind of solve problems, you know? And why I bring that up is because I think a lot of us get into this because we are working out our own shit and our
Yeah,
own problems,
I
right?
hear that. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
a misconception, yeah, was just that these things were just kind of like, phew, like wash off me. And I would suddenly step onto stage and receive my doctorate and walk off and be like, got it.
Yes.
Um, and so it wasn't like that at all. And if anything, it became a very rude awakening to that, like it didn't matter. And I had so much, and I have so much student loan debt because I was first generation college student. And my parents were just happy for me to do well, whatever that meant. You know, they were like, go ahead. I support you, but we can't pay for this. But go ahead, do your thing. Like,
that's a future you problem.
Right? Right? And so as a first generation college student, I just thought that's what mattered, is getting the degree. And I understand the path that I was on now, and it was worth it for me to get where I am emotionally and spiritually, but it did not take care of all things, if that makes any sense.
Oh, I hear that 100%. I thought similar things when I was considering becoming a psychologist, and I got to a point where I just thought the people are going to respect me with or without the degree, and the people are going to look at my skin color are going to look at the skin color with or without a degree.
Yes.
My mom has a saying. She says, you can change the color of your passport, but you can't change the color of your skin.
I love that.
She put that message in me growing up, and I've taken that with me.
That's really real. Yes, Khadija's mom. Yes.
I have a wise mom.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And what is your least favorite thing about your job? Whether that's sort of the mundane administrative task, or if there's a more conceptual aspect that you don't like.
Yeah. Paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
And I know everybody says that, but I think that it further stigmatizes people and it can further pathologize people. I think that it's great to have plans and write down notes. I frequently write notes when I'm seeing people, but it takes away from the emotion and the connection when I'm so busy on like writing that I'm like not focusing, and some of us don't have room. So like notes is something I really suck at, but not just notes, but also like I work at a university, so there's so much red tape.
Yes, bureaucratic nonsense.
Ugh. It's very overwhelming. Another part that I don't like, which is something I'm working on changing, and I do change, is like you're not supposed to be in contact with your client for like 2 years after. I think that is violent.
I agree with you. I think violent is a good word for that, because you created an attachment and then you're severing it.
Yes. And I don't care if we're talking about it for 2 months, for 3 months, for 4 months, for 6 months, which sometimes I do. The reality is folks never know how they're going to feel until they're in that loss and there's a separation. So I'm not saying that we're going to go out and be friends and go dancing and take shots together. That's not what I'm saying either, right? Yes. But I am saying that having healthy communication that is talked about, like the plan is talked about prior, and then having healthy communication where like this what would be safe and comfortable for me. This would work for me. I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with it. You know, like kind of establishing those boundaries, and even sometimes offering like we can have a session every other month or every couple, maybe there's a way to transition, or if you feel like you need me, just let me know and I can see if I can make space into my schedule. You know, even if we're not going to be like consistently together, I just think that a lot of us need to think outside of the box.
Yes, I'm all for boundaries, but the Western conception of boundaries, I've never been able to understand.
Right.
Because I grew up in Pakistan. I grew up in a very collectivist culture.
Yeah.
So it's just not something that I understand or that comes naturally to me.
That's right. Yeah. And I think like what you're saying is so on point, because for so many of us, we're coming home into cultures like that are very embedded in our culture, whatever that means. And then we're taught certain things in school, and then you're like, oh wait, so is my family enmeshed? Oh,
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, I have friends that are like, 18 people lived in my house at one time. Does that mean we were doing something wrong? Like, does it mean that my parents, you know, like, and sometimes we outgrow those traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those traditions are just like beautiful. They're there for a reason. But like American Western Eurocentric culture is like, oh no, you need to just be solitary all the time.
Well,
You
it's
know?
interesting that the right kind of family, as per the textbook, always looks like a white kind of family.
Right.
So I
Right.
don't know. It's coincidental. So you spoke a little bit about really feeling like having the initials next to your name, PhD, were really a driving force for you to get into the field. But was there anything else that led you to psychology and therapy?
Yeah. Um, you know, my own fucked up dynamics happening in my
Mm-hmm.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a lot, you know, as a kid, there was a lot of emotional abuse, you know, and I did not feel good a lot of my life. We'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what came up for me was a lot of rage, a lot of fucking anger, which I write about a lot on
Mm-hmm.
decolonizing therapy, because I feel like whiteness um, minimizes rage. Whiteness
Mm-hmm.
puts rage in a box, and whiteness is afraid of rage.
Whiteness racializes rage.
Yes. Um, and I honestly feel that rage helps keep me from being in a massive depression all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
So
it's yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead. Please,
It's
please. Go.
it's mobilizing because in depression you're
Yes,
frozen and anger is very mobilizing. It's
yes,
the thing that
yes.
gets you up off of your ass.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You are right on it. And that's one of the things that I do with the people that I work with when I know that they're really in this quote unquote depressive place, whatever that means like
Mm-hmm.
to them. My goal is to get them kind of riled up. Not riled up like, oh yeah, you know, like but riled up like, let's sit with that. This happened to you as a child. You were left this many hours at home. What do you think that felt like? Oh, I don't know. I don't remember. Right? That a distance thing. Like, are you willing to try that with me? Are we willing to sit here for like just 3 minutes? I'll time it and sit with what that would have been like for little Jennifer to be alone for this many hours. And then eventually the tears are coming, eventually the feelings. So it might take months, it might take years. But when the people I'm working with get to a place of anger and rage, I'm like, yes. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you're angry. They're like, but I'm just pissed at everybody all the fucking time. And no, my mother does that. And I'm like, yeah, welcome back. Welcome
We're
back.
getting somewhere.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. I don't know.
No,
But,
I love that. That's the passion there. The passions
yeah.
and the tangents we go off on, right?
Thank you.
Um,
But yes, how I got into this was my own rage. I
mhm.
was fighting a lot. You know, as a teenager, I was aggressive, and I was really sensitive, and I was a really big empath. I'm an empath, and you know, highly sensitive, and I knew things and I saw things and I pushed it away because I was like, this is crazy, quote unquote. What is this? Right. Um, and I went to college and I thought, you know, okay, maybe I'll get my bachelor's because my mother was like, in order to be in this house, right? My mother is Black Central American.
Mhm.
So my mother was like, in order to be in this house, you're going to school, son. Like you're going to school. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, whatever, I don't want to go to college. Every single time I went to college or grad school in my doctoral program, somebody pushed me into it, right? And I was always a good student in terms of A's or whatever it was. I had that streak in me because I loved writing, I loved reading, and I loved talking. And like surprise, right? So in that way, those things came quote unquote easy enough, and that was a privilege that I had, right? And the attention deficit I was living with and do live with,
Yes.
nobody was really picking up on, right? They just thought I was like really, really, really talkative. Like they didn't understand that to read something, if I wasn't enjoying it, would take me hours, you know? So I was an elementary ed major, undergrad. I was about to teach, like kids. And so I was English and elementary ed. And then I joined a peer education group. And we worked on our shit. Like we were in group every week and we cried together and we argued together and we went on trips together. And this man, John Sherry, created Peers Educating Peers, and it changed my life. And I currently am the coordinator of that program.
Oh my gosh, comes full circle.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
we'll get into that later, but it's actually the process of shutting down because the school's not giving us funding. It's like, Black and brown emotional health isn't important to them. That's another topic. But it saved my life, PEP, and I was in PEP, and then that was connected to the counseling center on campus because he was a therapist, he was a psychologist. So I started going to counseling at like 18, 19 years old. All my friends in that group were going to counseling. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
So at like 19 years old, I was in group therapy without realizing it. And I was in individual therapy weekly. And even though I might have been just talking about boyfriend shit, girlfriend shit, hanging out, even if I was just talking about how mad I was at my father, how my mother didn't listen to me, whatever it was, I still was getting my feelings out.
Yeah.
And I would not say at that age I was as conscious as a lot of the youth now. It definitely took me into my middle to upper 20s to start getting with it and like paying attention to identities, But being in PEP, that Peer Educating Peers program, made me want to be a therapist. Because then when I went to teaching for a year, I'm like, did you guys eat this morning? Like, what's going on? How come you have bags under your eyes? You didn't sleep? Why not? Like, what's happening with your mom? And I would get evaluations and they're like, can you focus on like English and not on like, and I'm like, no, but they're overwhelmed. They're like, you spent a whole class talking about feelings. And I'm like,
okay, maybe that's where I need to be.
Right. So after a year, I left teaching and I went back and I, did some grad classes and that's,
I think that's great because I love hearing stories where the career path is a zigzag and it's not linear. And I love what you said about the peer support group because in my view, teaching that mental health first aid and having strong peer support deconstructs therapy, deinstitutionalizes therapy, puts it in the hands of the community. And I love that. And I really hope that there's some way or somehow that program can be maintained in some way.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, a lot of us are grieving, and I'm hoping to meld it into decolonizing therapy. We feel like it will be resurrected. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. What is your favorite thing about your work?
The people. I know it sounds hella cheesy. It's not. I could be seeing a student for a year and a half, and they come in, and whether they're in a very, very, very heavy place, like I don't want to be here right now. Dr. Mullan, it's not your fault. They always love to take care of us, right? Like, or they're coming in like, oh my gosh, I actually told my mother, no, I'm not picking up my little brother today. I have a test, or whatever it is. Or whether they're like, I didn't pick up a drink all week. I thought of you. I cursed at you when I thought of you. But I didn't pick up a fucking drink all week. And you don't know what it is. It's just like, I could be in the worst effing mood.
Yeah.
And I sit down in front of them and I take a breath and I'm out. It's not about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is not about me anymore. It becomes about us, them, the collective being well. And I love seeing people's growth. Some therapists like to keep it pretty like, and surface, I'm not meaning that insultingly. Some clients needed to be a little surfacey for a little while to feel safe, Like I'm not trying to insult people by saying some therapists keep it surface. I am the person at the depths of the ocean, right? Like, I don't know how to keep it surface. Like, I've never have, not in my own life or anything. So for me, it's work to like teach the coping skills and to kind of like keep it there. There's an instinct in me that wants to like dive with them. So one of the things I do love is when people are ready to dive. But usually that takes anywhere from like 8 months to maybe a year and a half, sometimes longer, before people are like, you know what? We've been skirting around this rage issue for a lot. Let's go. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? This is going to be hard. You sure you want to do this? But I love teaching them tapping, EFT. I feel like that's a really useful technique. I also do EMDR when appropriate with therapy clients. I think that it can help with trauma very, very instinctively. And I talk a lot about like somatics and the body keeping score.
Yes.
Bessel van der Kolk and others, and Peter Levine's work. I have a poster looking at a lot of polyvagal fat, like, hyperarousal and not talk about the ladder. I think it helps normalize very intense feelings for people. So I love doing that.
And I think another thing that we're taught in traditional therapy or traditional psychology is keeping a screen, being that neutral, blank screen, and discouraging the therapist from going deep into there. And I'm just curious, as you identify as an empath, how do you navigate going deep without losing yourself or draining yourself?
That's a very insightful question. It's a great question. I feel like I continue to work on that every day, every single day. What I have been doing that has been really helpful is making sure that I quote unquote shield or protect myself before somebody comes in. If I visualize something around me, I have a spray in my office that I make myself that one of my teachers has instructed me to put together that she sort of channeled from my ancestors and guides. And it has certain little things that work for me and my etheric physical bodies. And so I spray that on things, believe it or not, like that is the ritual. I'm a ritual person. I'm very ritualistic. Part of it is me living with attention deficit. And part of it is me being a highly spiritual person. And maybe those are hand in hand, to be honest with you, but the spray, I spray people's chairs because I don't want them to pick up. I try to be very responsible. I don't want them to pick up what was left from someone else. I do movement in my room. Sometimes I'm like moving my arms. Sometimes I'm shaking myself out. All of those are ways of me discharging energy. Sometimes I'm clapping like around my body, and kind of like, Other times, I have salt, like sea salt, coarse salt in my office. I sprinkle that in different corners. I have various like tourmaline, black tourmaline, obsidian. All of those things are important for me and I take care of. It's not like, some people talk about the new age and that's fine. That's, I do care that it gets appropriated, but the reality is I'm still going to do what my ancestors have done and I'm still going to use what has been here for a long time. And I don't believe like it's new age for me. Like I think that the people appropriating it think it's new age. But I think for a lot of us, we're just re-remembering.
It's very old age. Yeah. It's very old age. It's right? Very old age. Yeah. Hearing you talk about ritual, I'm learning for myself that ritual is basically spiritualized routine and it just grounds us. So I'm an air sign, so I need grounding. I need some earth. I need some water. So
what's your sign if you don't mind me asking?
Aquarius.
Aquarius, yes. Yes, you all are changing the world.
broad humanitarian vision, but at the same time, weirdly introverted.
I get, yeah. I love Aquarius, I appreciate you all.
Thank you. I hear a lot of hate for us on the internet, so I'm glad.
I don't know why. No, I feel like we just have to honor and know who a person is, and I feel like Aquariuses are so needed right now. Yeah, definitely. Guess what sign I am? My sun's sign, anyway.
I want to say Pisces because you spoke about deep diving in, so that's what I want to say, but I don't know.
Okay, no, close enough, close. My mom is a Pisces. I'm a Cancer.
Okay. So I
Cancer.
got
Yeah.
water there.
I'm a Cancer
That's
sun.
awesome.
But
So
my
the ocean.
but my rising, my Venus, I have a lot of Virgo in my chart. A lot.
Virgo was actually going to be my second guess.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
What is something you learned in school, in the classroom, during your undergraduate all the way to doctoral program that you have really carried with you now in your practice as a therapist?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important things I learned in my classroom is context.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my professors, particularly in my doctoral program, which is why I kind of helped lead an uprising, is since we were a very spiritual Buddhist Hindu school, right, that focused on spirituality. CIIS was very Eastern spirituality. There was a lot of appropriation, and there was a lot of misuse of techniques and terms and herbal remedies. So for example, I had a transpersonal psychology class, which I appreciated, right? We learned a lot about what we call felt sense and really like scanning the body. We learned about pre-birth trauma, Ken Wilber's work, Stan Groff, a lot of psychedelic use and talk. And me being an East Coaster was like, what did I do? What is happening? Like I like so super East Coast and super like and like, yeah, what's up everybody? Like, and they were just all sitting there in Buddhist lotus pose, like, hello. Oh, we love your energy. You're so large energy. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going home. I can't do this.
You do have good energy, I'll just say.
Thank you. But man, these people, like my professors, although a lot of them meant well, 8 out of 10 of them would not talk about like, okay, we're talking about like Mother Ayahuasca, right? Like the plant. We're talking to us in my traditions. That's Madre Ayahuasca. Like we honor her by, like you say thank you, before you use it. There's a process.
She's a spirit.
Yes, thank you. And they would not say as such. And so they're showing us slideshows of predominantly white looking and identifying people going into the woods and like Brazil or Peru, like going on a quote unquote vision journey quests and getting rid of their traumas. And I would sit there watching this, and I would feel triggered. At the time I didn't realize I was that triggered, but my body was like literally like shaking with rage. And I remembered raising my hand at the end. Everybody was like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about that? Oh, this is wonderful. This is this. And of course you see in the pictures, the guides, like traditional, like native individuals, right? And a lot of indigenous, like there was indigenous aspects and culture around, but nobody was addressing it. It was kind of just like in the background.
Yeah.
And I remember raising my hand and saying, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the pipilis, if you could tell us more about these people, if you could tell us more about where ayahuasca traditionally comes from, how it's harvested. Can you tell us a little bit about like, what is it traditionally used for? I know in my culture, when we go on journeys and vision quests, it is a rite of passage. And sometimes other journeys are when someone has died and there's a loss and people don't make it back all the fucking time. And, I remember he was looking at me, my professor, and he's like, well, like, but that's not the focus of this class. Like this class, you can get that in multicultural. I'm like, but these are their plants, right?
I really take issue with, you can get that in multicultural, because that is the issue, because you're separating into little tiny chunks when really it should be more integrated.
Yes.
And just hearing you talk about the ayahuasca just makes me think, well, they want the indigenous flowers, they don't want the indigenous roots.
Yes.
In my tradition, it's cannabis. Or I'm trying to learn more about my own ancestors, and cannabis was something they used.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking to myself, so that was one of the things I felt like context wasn't talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also felt that when professors were called out, even respectfully, we were shut down frequently. And we would get this like, oh, you'll learn, you'll understand. So yeah, for me, that's one of the things that I took with me, and I learned it the hard way though, that when I teach a class or when I'm talking about things, context I think is always important.
And that's sort of the new agey schools, which are supposed to be the lesser institutionalized places. So one would think, oh, it's not supposed to happen here, but it does. It still does. It still happens in spiritual circles. It is everywhere. It's not something that's escapable. We just need to do more work on that.
Yes, I would agree with you completely. Yeah.
Going way back, what was your first job? The first task that you ever received money for, or a paycheck?
So I think there would be two things. One was babysitting all my cousins, right? Like all my little cousins. And sometimes that was terror. So I would get like $10, 15, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. You know, at a very young age, my father was like, you have to buy your own hair gel, and, you know, having thick curly hair, it was just like, that was a whole bottle a week. Like, and, you know, at a very young age, I had to like purchase my own stuff, you know? And so I would say 13, 14, believe it or not, I was working in a mailroom in an apartment building. So UPS or mail would bring packages. I would sign them in. People would come get them in the building, sign them out. So that would be my first job. And my mom made me get a job at an early age.
I think that's a good thing. I'm going to do the same thing if and when I have kids. Learn how to manage finances early too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever doubted that this work being therapy, have you ever doubted that therapy is what you're supposed to be doing?
Great question. I'm loving your question.
I've sat on them for so long.
Yeah, they're pretty dope. They're amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the answer is very yes and very no, and I'll quickly try to explain why. No, in the sense that, because that's my initial, I feel that when I was born, little pieces were put into the soup making me, the energetic spiritual soup making Jennifer, and they were very clear what they were doing. Like they knew that the things that I have hated about myself growing up were going to be the things that I had to learn to begin to accept and tolerate, that would allow me to be the medicine for people today. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
I was looking at your face, I was like, are you sure?
No, that was my face when that's just hitting me. Yeah.
So yeah, I got goosebumps saying it, because I felt like they were like, yeah, go ahead, here you go. So like the very things, like having a big mouth and talkative and big energy and big hair and big body, and, you know, like just, you know, like all of it is so necessary for me to have learned all the things I've learned, to be able to stand right here at 41 years old, to be able to talk about like, this is why I politicize my therapeutic work, and this is why blah, 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 blah. So in that way, no, I've never questioned it, because I kind of always loved therapy, psychology, and even as I am, quote unquote, deconstructing it the best of my ability, I'm not the only one to do that. I sit on the shoulders of many people that have deconstructed, Eurocentric therapy. I'm definitely not the first one. But even as I do that, I'm very conscious that my experiences, in a non-egoic way and in a very kind of depersonalized way, have informed what I'm doing now. I say yes, though, because it's so hard some days. I get very burned out working in the system in which I'm in. Not when I'm working per se for myself or for the people, but
Yeah.
working at the university. Many of us are overworked, underpaid. Those are the days when I'm like, you know what? Why didn't I just like become a chef? Like, why didn't I? I could be a dog walker right now. Really, I could be a trainer. I could work in the, like, I'll read a book on octopuses. And I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just start working in an aquarium. And I'm, learn about octopuses and like, like study them, and just like there's so much less pain. And that's not true, but so in that way, the burnout and the capitalism fatigue and the using of our Black and brown bodies, right? Like that is when I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I question, should I be doing this? Or when, I get in trouble, and I'm saying that, when I get in trouble with air quotes, when someone really, really doesn't like what I have to say. I mean, we'd like to think that we're beyond that, but sometimes that shit really hurts, or it gets misconstrued. Or usually what happens is I don't have enough space on Instagram to write everything I really want to say.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking out like chunks because it won't send it and save it. And I'm like, see, I knew I should have left that freaking sentence saying, of course, this is a caveat. Or, and then sometimes I'm just like, okay, people aren't going to understand. They're going to think I'm throwing therapy under the bus by saying that therapy is inherently white supremacist. And I'm like, no, F that. What I'm saying is I love therapy and psychology and helping people enough to be a critical lover and an analyzer of this field. And I want us to look at how we're perpetuating these fucking stereotypes and, and soaking in and internalizing all of this white supremacist ideology.
Thank you for saying that. And can I just offer you a hack? What I do if I need to say too much and Instagram doesn't let me fit it all in, I type it up on a graphic, and then I put that in the square of the picture. And that way I can make as many panes as I want. Yeah. And then I'm not limited. So
that's a good,
put that in your back
pocket. Thank you. Yeah.
Because I love your writing, so I'd love for you to be able to write more what I like.
Thank you so much. And then another part of me feels like, you know what? That's, doing group therapy a lot and being somebody that thrives off group and feels like that is one of the ways that we naturally can decolonize is having more group work as opposed to just individual so much. I can truly say to you that sometimes I just know how to be the bad guy, whatever that means, right? I know how to be the person that everyone is going to project their shit on, and I'm kind of used to holding it. And sometimes I've got to quote unquote say the wrong thing or not say enough of something so someone can get activated and work through whatever shit is there for them. So I feel like my work is meant to generate some kind of feeling. I don't know if it does for everybody, but even if they don't like it, that's a feeling.
And whoever it's meant for will take it and run with it.
That's right.
And whoever it doesn't resonate with, then, that's not meant for you. You can follow another Instagram page. There are lots.
Absolutely.
So you spoke a bit about how you continue despite the doubt. How do you sustain your passion for this work?
My people, your squad, your crew, your whatever. And some of my people consist of family. My parents have come to, I think, doing a lot of work on self and on my ancestral dynamics and on my family. My parents and my parents have chosen to grow with me. And young me would have said that's not possible. But they have chosen to grow with me. I mean, they're not, they're not sitting up with my mom the other day. I just gave her a lesson on like gender identity and sexual orientation on a paper plate. And like, we're breaking down she's like, okay, so how do I know when to use they, them, and this? And I was just like, for my 70-year-old mom to be asking that question, that's healing right there. Like that will make me emotional. Does that make sense? Because, that's just out of her frame of reference. But she's like, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings if they're like being a waitress for us or something. I want to make sure. And I was like, okay, sometimes you could just ask. what are your pronouns, or how do you identify, or, listen to other people, or don't you, or just use they, them all the time. And she's like, okay, yes, I will. So my family growing and learning with me motivates me.
Mm.
My friends and people that we continue to grow together struggle together, and that struggle doesn't always look easy. And that struggle sometimes means that we're not talking for a few months, or I'm watching people that I love struggle together. I think that's real.
Yeah.
Another thing that motivates me are the youth, like 20 somethings. I know it's not youth, but and younger, the passion, the fire, the ingenuity, the pushing above the envelopes, pushing out of boxes, identifying within decent safety parameters, like however the fuck they want, like like reclaiming shit. Like the youth, I feel like, are some of our biggest teachers, and I feel like intergenerational organizing has to include youth and elders, otherwise it ain't really organizing and grassroots work.
Because it's not, well, what are
Yeah.
you doing it for?
Yeah. And the last thing that motivates me, is the grassroots work. Is I am an organizer, and some of my best friends, their number one jobs, literally, figuratively, is to serve the people. Everything else they do is just to get by and survive basic needs. So I am not on the grounds, as we used to say, as much as I used to be, because I am finding this platform as a way, but I always try to make sure I'm at movements and certain actions that I really need to be in. I make sure that I'm accountable. So if that means checking in, sometimes asking for permission, letting people know in my collectives what I'm thinking of doing and if they think that's a good idea or not. I can't stress enough how important I think it is to be part of a movement or a collective. And I think that we really learn and understand what's going on in the world, understanding imperialism more, late stage capitalism. Like, I feel as though more of us therapists need to understand that people's well-being isn't just based on them. It is based on so many different environmental stressors around them. Because I feel like it's unethical to just think like, okay, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
It's so unethical. I remember being an undergrad and just thinking about CBT, and it made me angry because I was shaking, because I was like, well, what am I going to do if I'm a therapist and someone comes into my office and says he's a victim of racism? Am I going to tell him, just say a couple of things to yourself to make you think that it's not happening to you? It is happening to you. I don't know. I think CBT, when handled properly, doesn't have to be that way, but I think a lot of it is just pretending that these systemic issues don't exist, and all you can do is alter your thinking, and once you alter your thinking, snap of a finger, everything's good. No, I can alter my thinking as much as I want. It's not going to alter my reality.
Absolutely. I can say that I'm safe. That doesn't necessarily mean that I can't get shot by a stray bullet on my corner, or that a cop isn't going to pull us over and beat the shit out of my partner, because of what they look like. Or absolutely. And I think I wrote in one of my posts that I think that, and I'm generalizing, I know this, I do sometimes use CBT for thought distortions and stuff when people are just like, I'm horrible, I'm disgusting, I'm this.
Yes.
But I think CBT is terribly Eurocentric. I think it's, just, I'm going to force myself to change my thoughts. I think that's very white, terribly white. It's terribly, like, almost competitive against self. It's kind of a little bit shaming, and I again, I know that some people do it well and can be very creative with it, but that was the primary class that we were forced to take, that and psychodynamic, in my university, in my schools. So that says a lot, doesn't it?
Well, it's also because it's the most popular, because it's the cheapest.
Right.
And it's the quickest.
Right.
And insurance companies don't necessarily want to invest in that longer term therapy.
Yep. Yeah. There's more evidence-based practices.
Yes. Yeah.
Who's evidence?
Well, and maybe just like eclectic is the way to go, because sometimes you need to alter the thought distortion. Sometimes you need to go into your relationship with your mother. Sometimes you need to go into your mother. Am I going to edit out that Freudian slip or not?
Don't edit it. Leave it in.
That's awful. I'm sorry, Mom. I know she's going to listen to this and be like, this child. And on that very vivid note, that is all we have time for this week's episode of Brown Girl Biz. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, the link to my Patreon will be in the description below. It does cost me money to host these episodes as well as have all the equipment. So I hope you consider donating. The link will be in the description below, as well as the links to all of Dr. Jennifer Mullan's work. And I want to thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to stay tuned for next week, which will be part 2 of my interview with Dr. Jennifer Mullan. And I hope you all have a great week.